Well, hey, it says I'm live here at the Walter Bosley channel, and I want to welcome all of you who are watching. Um, Today's episode is furthering the discussion about a novel that we're enthused about and I'm fascinated with, and that, of course, is James Hilton's Lost Horizon. Now, if you haven't seen the previous two episodes that we did on Lost Horizon, go back in the videos, scroll back, catch them. You don't necessarily have to have seen those two episodes to enjoy this one, but um, it's a topic that I'm fascinated with, and I would recommend seeing the original film. The one from 1974, 73 was eh. They attempted to make it a musical and it just doesn't work. Go back and watch the black and white one from the 30s, 1937, um, and I think you'll appreciate that version better. It's a Frank Capra film, by the way. So today's discussion um, is going to involve a very interesting and informative article from World Explorer magazine. Okay. Let me look to the live chat here and welcome the folks that are here before I go diving into today's topic. We have D. Dorothy Papineau. Hello, D. She was the first one in the live chat, so she wins the first one in the live chat recognition award. And that was it, being recognized. Thank you, D, for being here. Malia, of course, is with us. And Nick of Time is here. Tim Houston. Johnny Side is here. Greg Betts. Crystal Fire. Fractal Education. And Paul Martin. Welcome all of you to the live chat. I'm sure more people will file in by the thousands as we get going. And speaking of get going, I'm going to do that right now. And I'm going to start today's episode with a reading from World Explorer magazine that I showed you before. This is an article. Let me take a sip from the Gorn. This is an article titled Ancient Tibet in the Land of ZHANGZHUNG by David Hatcher Childress. Friend of mine since 2002, and he's been a guest here on the Walter Bosley channel. So here we go. The land of Tibet, the roof of the world, has long fascinated Westerners and Asians alike. Tibet holds such mysteries as the Potala Palace in Lhasa, Shiva's home, Mount Kailash, the secret city of Shambhala, and other remote or hidden spots. The landscape of Tibet is typically a high desert with snow-capped mountains and icy cold streams and rivers. There are many sheltered valleys in Tibet where farming and animal husbandry occur. Parts of eastern Tibet are very mountainous and green, especially along the borders of Sikkim, Bhutan, and Assam. But when did this amazing culture originate? Tibet is famous for being a Buddhist country, but what was it like before Buddhism took hold? It is generally agreed that modern Tibetan culture originated in an ancient kingdom located in what is now western and northwestern Tibet called ZHANGZHUNG or Shangshung. ZHANGZHUNG is associated with the Bon religion, the pre-Buddhist religion of the area. The Bon religion remained a distinct religion in Tibet and Nepal and influenced some of the practices and philosophies of Tibetan Buddhism. Sorry, I'm causing my camera to go a little haywire on the focus, but I'll stop moving so much. Bon monasteries, similar to Buddhist monasteries, still exist in parts of western Tibet and the Mustang region of Nepal. The Bon use as their symbol a swastika that goes to the left instead of to the right, as in a Buddhist swastika. Tonpa Shenrab, founder of the Bon religion. The Bon religion is said to have been founded by Tonpa Shenrab, also known as Shenrab Miwo. According to Bon doctrine, Tonpa Shenrab lived 18,000 years ago. This is 15,500 years before Gautama Buddha, who lived circa 500 BC. Practitioners of Bon believe that Tonpa Shenrab first studied the Bon doctrine in the land of Tajik Olmo Lung Ring, at the end of which he pledged to Shenla Okar, the god of compassion, that he would guide the peoples of this world to liberation. Like the Buddha, Tonpa Shenrab was of royal birth. Tonpa Shenrab renounced his royal inheritance at the age of 31 to travel the path of enlightenment. Tonpa Shenrab embraced the life of a renunciate and commenced austerities, spreading the doctrine of Bon. Eventually he arrived in the land of ZHANGZHUNG, which is the area around Mount Kailash. Accounts of Tonpa Shenrab's life are to be found in three principal sources: the Dodur, a manuscript from the 19th century, and two sources of oral lineage called Zermik and Ziji. The story of Tonpa Shenrab is also told in a 14th century terma, or treasure in Buddhism, a secret doctrine, written or oral, of Loden Yingpo. Show my cameras. The Bon religion, called Yungdrung Bon. Sorry, folks, the camera focus thing, I moved too much and it's, anyway, the importance is what I'm reading, not how I look. The Bon religion, called Yungdrung Bon, is essentially the root religion and therefore culture of Tibet, according to Latri Khenpo Nyima Dakpa Rinpoche in the book Opening the Door to Bon, published in 2005 by Snow Lion. Tonpa Shenrab writes, or Tonpa Shenrab Dakpa Rinpoche writes, was born in a completely pure and spiritual land named Tajik Olmo Lung Ring, hereafter Olmo Lung Ring, which is beyond the impure nature of this existing world. This is the birthplace of all enlightened ones. It is a perfected realm where peace and true joy last forever. It is free from any danger of destruction by any elements of nature. Now I'll pause right there. It is free from any danger of destruction by any elements of nature. Does this not sound like Shangri-La as described by James Hilton in Lost Horizon? Okay, the valley with the beautiful weather surrounded by the mountain peaks, and yet the terrible weather outside of the Shangri-La Valley. It's awful out there. It doesn't affect Shangri-La itself, right? Free from any danger of destruction by any of the elements of nature. Is this where Hilton got the idea for Shangri-La, or that aspect? I'll continue with Dakpa Rinpoche's book. He's referring to Tonpa Shenrab, right? The land of Olmo Lung Ring lies to the west of Mount Kailash and is the shape of an 8-petaled lotus divided into 4 parts: the inner, the middle, outer parts, and the boundary. Its sky is like an 8-spoked wheel. Olmo Lung Ring is filled with beautiful gardens, stupas, parks, and snow-covered mountains. Again, sounds like Shangri-La, right? Yungdrung Gutsek, a pyramid-shaped mountain with 9 Yungdrungs ascending like a staircase to the top, is in the center of Olmo Lung Ring. While a single Yungdrung symbolizes the everlasting and indestructible essence of mind, the 9 Yungdrungs symbolize the 9 ways or stages of Bon. On each step of the mountain are temples of both male and female deities and beautiful stupas that symbolize the mind of enlightenment. 4 rivers flow from Yungdrung Gutsek. The mountain has 4 sides that face in the 4 directions, and these rivers flow from the corners at the mountain's base, from formations that resemble the heads of 4 different animals. From the east, the snow line is the source of the river Narzara. From the north, the horse is the source of the river Pakshi. From the west, the peacock is the source of the river Gimshang, and from the south, the elephant is the source of the river Sindhu. Some scholars identify Mount Kailash in northwestern Tibet as Omo Lung Ring, due to the lakes and snow-covered mountains that surround the area and 4 rivers that flow from it. The followers of Bon do not accept this explanation. This is because Omo Lung Ring is not a physical place that can be visited by ordinary human beings. In order to reach Omo Lung Ring, one must practice, become purified of all negativities, and achieve enlightenment. Bonpos pray to be born in Omo Lung Ring because this can occur only after achieving enlightenment. Visiting Mount Kailash is possible before enlightenment is reached, as long as one is determined to accept the physical challenges. Isn't that interesting? This is proof to Bonpos that Mount Kailash is not Omo Lung Ring. Historical Bon texts state very clearly that the holy mountain Mount Kailash was in the center of the kingdom of ZHANGZHUNG, which was the closest neighboring kingdom to Tibet and existed until the end of the 8th century. ZhangZhung was integrated into Tibet after the death of the Emperor Ligmincha, its last ruler. In early times, the kingdom of ZhangZhung extended from what is today the upper part of western Tibet, through parts of Nepal, northern India, such as Ladakh, Zanskar, Kinwar, Spiti, etc., to Pakistan, specifically Kashmir, and to China, the Karakoram area, if I'm pronouncing that right. Most of the Bon teachings have been translated from the ZhangZhung language into Tibetan. Mount Kailash is a holy place for Bonpos and is blessed by the ZhangZhung deity Mirai. The Mirai teachings were among the main practices of the ZhangZhungpa, the people of ZhangZhung, and were later introduced into Tibet. The lineage of this practice has been preserved, and it continues to the present time. So the land of ZhangZhung appears to be centered around Mount Kailash and includes considerable territory to the west, north, and east of the sacred mountain. This territory stretched to the south into parts of northern India and present-day Nepal. It should be noted the southeastern side of Mount Kailash, the side facing the 2 sacred lakes, has what appears to be a swastika on its impressive sheer face. This gigantic swastika is the result of a huge slash down the center of the mountain face and a large parallel slash across the face. It is most apparent when there is recent snowfall on the mountain. The land of ZhangZhung and its people were frequently mentioned in Tibetan texts. Tradition has it that ZhangZhung consisted of 3 different regions: Sgoba the outer, Phugpa the inner, and Barba the middle. The outer section is thought to extend as far as Gilgit in Pakistan and even to the Kyrgyz mountains of Kyrgyzstan, which is directly north of Gilgit. Ladakh, including Lahore and Spiti, was part of Sagoba. The other areas are yet to be identified, but may be areas of central Tibet and even the Altai Himalaya in western Mongolia. Now, remember, Altai Himalaya, that's even the title of Nicholas Rorich's travel diary. Very famous book of his. Hope you can see that. And we'll hear more from Rourke, I think, later. Well, where did I leave off? Archaeological work on the Changtang Plateau of central Tibet in 2010 found possible evidence of an Iron Age culture in the area, which some have tentatively identified as that of the ZhangZhung. Don't forget, the first Bon avatar was supposedly born in 16,000 BC. The capital city of ZhangZhung was called Kyunglung, the Silver Palace of Garuda. Oh, that's interesting. Garuda enters the picture here. You know, for a little side tidbit, think of, oh my gosh, I'm doing a brain dump. I'm thinking of the Garuda association to the Mothman thing. Andy Colvin, by author Andy Colvin, really presents the Garuda Mothman discussion. the Silver Palace of Garuda. It supposedly lay southwest of Mount Kailash, otherwise known as Mount Tisi, in the ZHANGZHUNG language. The remains of palaces in the upper Sutlej Valley are thought to be the ruins of this city. According to Rolf Alfred Stein, author of Tibetan Civilization, the area of ZHANGZHUNG, which he calls Shangshung, was not historically a part of Tibet and was distinctly foreign territory to the Tibetans. Says Rolf Stein, and I quote, "Then further west, the Tibetans encountered a distinctly foreign nation, Shangshung, with its capital at Kyunglung, Mount Kailash, and Lake Manasarvar. You'll have to forgive me. Formed part of this country, whose language has come down to us through early documents. Though still unidentified, it seems to be Indo-European. Geographically, well, let me pause there. Though still unidentified, it seems to be Indo-European. Our friend Mr. Oak, in the Vedic history book that is there in the other room that I've referred to a lot, would probably have something to say about that. Geographically, the country was certainly open to India, both through Nepal and by way of Kashmir and Ladakh. Kailash is a holy place for the Indians who make pilgrimages to it. No one knows how long they have done so, but the cult may well go back to the times when Shangshung was still independent of Tibet. How far Shangshung stretched to the north, east, and west is a mystery. We have already had an occasion to remark that Shangshung, embracing Kailash sacred mountain of the Hindus, may once have had a religion largely borrowed from Hinduism. The situation may even have lasted for quite a long time. In fact, about 950, the Hindu king of Kabul had a statue of Vishnu of the Kashmiri type with 3 heads, which he claimed had been given him by the king of the Bota, or Tibetans, who in turn had obtained it from Kailash. This is interesting, this reference to Kabul, Afghanistan. As you know, I went there several times in the 2000s, and you've heard me talk about having to fly over the Hindu Kush. That's the western edge of the Himalayas, which tower over Kabul. And, that would have been interesting to see, the statue of Vishnu in Kabul. Not much is really known about the ZHANGZHUNG during the literally thousands of years of pilgrims, mainly from India, making the pilgrimage to Mount Kailash to see the sacred mountain. This would have been a major part of the economy, as would farming and yak herding in the valleys of what is now western Tibet. Trade with India, a source of exotic goods and metal utensils, would have been very important. Salt was a major export from western Tibet to India, including the popular Himalayan pink salt. Quartz crystals and gold were also products of western Tibet. At some time around 634 AD, ZhangZhung was conquered from an area of central Tibet by the king Songtsen Gampo. Songtsen Gampo then united with the country of Yangtong and conquered more tribes before threatening the Songzhou Chinese emperor with an army of more than 200,000 men. He then sent an envoy with gifts of gold and silk to the Chinese emperor to ask for a Chinese princess in marriage, and when refused, attacked Songzhou. He apparently finally retreated and apologized, and later the emperor granted his request for the marriage of his daughter. Stein says Tibetan accounts relate that the central Tibetan king, this area is today Qinghai, formerly known as Amdo Tibet, and the king of ZhangZhung had married each other's sisters in a political alliance. However, the Tibetan wife of the king of ZhangZhung complained of poor treatment by the king's principal wife. War ensued, and through the treachery of the Tibetan princess, according to Stein, King Ligmikya of ZhangZhung, while on his way to Sumba in the Amdo province, was ambushed and killed by King Srongtsen Gampo's soldiers. Srongtsen Gampo's soldiers. As a consequence, ZhangZhung was annexed to Bod. Sorry, folks, I'm flubbing these words here. As a consequence, ZHANGZHUNG was annexed to Bod, or Central Tibet. Thereafter, the new kingdom born of the unification of ZHANGZHUNG and Bod was known as Bodergyal Kab. R.A. Stein places the conquest of ZHANGZHUNG in 645. There was a brief revolt in 677 AD, but it was brought under control by the son of Songtsen Gampo, by the firm governance of the great leaders of the Nyar clan. A handful of ZHANGZHUNG texts and 11th century bilingual Tibetan documents attest to a ZHANGZHUNG language which was related to Kinwari, a language spoken by certain tribes in Himachal Pradesh. The Bonpo claim that the Tibetan writing system is derived from the ZHANGZHUNG alphabet, while modern scholars recognize the clear derivation of Tibetan script from a North Indian script. Possibly both are correct, and it is clear that modern Tibetan script is derived from North Indian Sanskrit scripts. And we come to the secret city of Shambhala. The Bonpos claim that Tonpa Shenrab lived some 18,000 years ago and visited Tibet from the land of Tajik Omolungring, which they say is another name for Shambhala. Okay, remember we were talking about that was the place that was protected from the natural elements, right? Which is essentially how Hilton describes Shangri-La. And there has long been a discussion that Shangri-La has also, been derived from Shambhala. Okay, so here we have it. The place protected by the natural from the natural elements is, claimed by the Bonpos to be Shambhala. So even more reason to suspect that we're talking about the real-life inspiration for Shangri-La in the novel. Bonpos also suggests that during this time, Lord Shenrab's teaching permeated the entire subcontinent of India and was partly responsible for the development of the Vedic religion. They give as an example Mount Kailash, which is the center of ZHANGZHUNG culture and is also the most sacred mountain to Hindus. As a result, the Bonpos claim that the supposedly much later Hindu teaching owes its origin partially to Tonpa Shenrab and the Bon religion. Hindus would probably say that Vedic Hinduism is older than 18,000 years. Yeah. Certainly, we know that Hindus believe that the god Shiva, also known as Shankar, lives upon or inside the mountain called Kailash. In Tibetan Buddhist tradition, Shambhala is a spiritual kingdom and is mentioned in the Buddhist text known as the Kalachakra Tantra. The Bon scriptures speak of a closely related land called Tajik Omolungring, which they say is the same place as Shambhala. There you have it, as previously stated. According to Wikipedia, the Sanskrit name Shambhala is taken from the name of a city mentioned in the Hindu Puranas, probably in reference to Sambal in Uttar Pradesh. The mythological relevance of the place originates with a prophecy in Vishnu Purana, according to which Shambhala will be the birthplace of Kalki, the next incarnation of Vishnu, who will usher in a new age, the Satya Yuga. It is also the prophesied ruling kingdom of Maitreya, the future Buddha. Shambhala is said to be ruled by the future Buddha Maitreya. That's kind of redundant. In the narrative of the Kalachakra Tantra, coming from Dolpopa Sherab Gyaltsen, who died in 1361 AD, King Manusakirti is said to have been born in 159 BC and ruled over a kingdom of 300,510 followers of the Mlecha religion, some of whom worship the sun. Now, I want to point out that number. A kingdom of 300,510 followers. Now, when you do the number crunching thing on that, you add up those digits, and what does that come to? That comes to the number 9. Take away the zeros, you have 351. 3 plus 5 plus 1. There's 9. Now, remember the legend of the 9 unknown, and then the ancient Hindu-related, the 9. That's, I think, clearly some type of reference to that tradition. I like to point those out when I see the nines. He is said to have expelled 20,000 people from his domain who clung to Surya Samadhi, solar worship, or Samadhi, rather than convert to Kalachakra, which is known as Wheel of Time Buddhism. Isn't that interesting? Wheel of Time. After realizing these were the wisest and best of his people and how much he was in need of them, he later asked them to return, and some did. Those who did not return are said to have set up the city of Shambhala. Manuscritti initiated the preaching of the Kalachakra teachings in order to try to convert those who returned and were still under his rule. In 59 BC, he abdicated his throne to his son, Pundarika, and died soon afterward, entering the Sambhogakaya of Buddhahood. The Kalachakra Tantra prophesies that when the world declines into war and greed and all is lost, the 25th Kalki king Maitreya will emerge from Shambhala with a huge army to vanquish dark forces and usher in a worldwide golden age. I immediately think of the mysterious army that emerges from the dark north as discussed in Revelations, the faux biblical book. This final battle is prophesied for the year 2424 or 2425 in the 3,304th year after the death of Buddha. Thereafter, Buddhism would survive another 1,800 years. Westerners first learned about Shambhala when one of the explorers in Tibet, the Portuguese missionary Estevão Casella. Maybe if our friends, our Portuguese friends in the live chat are here, they can tell me how to pronounce that more properly. Estevão Casella heard about Shambhala, transcribed as Zembala with an X, Xembala, and thought it was another name for Cathay or China. Casella in 1627 headed to Tashalumpu, the seat of the Panchen Lama, and discovering his mistake, returned to his base in India. Then the Hungarian scholar Sándor Kőrösi Soma, writing in 1833, provided the first geographic account of a so-called fabulous country in the north, situated between 45 and 50 degrees north latitude. Here we go. Theosophical Society co-founder Helena Blavatsky alluded to the Shambhala myth in her books starting in 1877 with the publication of Isis Unveiled. Blavatsky, who claimed to be in contact with the Great White Lodge of Himalayan adepts, mentions Shambhala in several places, but without giving it especially great emphasis. Remember, my personal position on Blavatsky is that she's a mixed bag. You can't, you have to consider things from Blavatsky. She's just a mixed bag as far as being a source. Another theosophist, Alice A. Bailey, claims Shambhala was an extra-dimensional place on the astral plane, a spiritual center where the governing deity of Earth, Sanat Kumara, dwells as the highest avatar of the planetary logos of Earth. With Blavatsky and Bailey were well into the early days of what we call New Age. Okay, just be aware of that. In 1924, Nicholas and Helena Rerich led an expedition aimed at Shambhala. Here we go. Nicholas Rerich, and I believe he talks about that expedition in this book here. In fact, he writes about Tibet in part 12, okay, page 366, in this edition of Altai Himalaya. Now, it's his photo that's on the graphic for this episode. So, Nicholas and Helena Rerich believed that Baluka Mountain in the Altai Mountains was an entrance to Shambhala, a common belief in that region. Wikipedia tells us that, inspired by theosophical lore and several visiting Mongol lamas, Gleb Boki, the chief Bolshevik cryptographer and one of the bosses of the Soviet secret police, along with his writer friend Alexander Barchenko, embarked on a quest for Shambhala in an attempt to merge the Kalachakra Tantra and the ideas of communism in the early 1920s. Oh boy, we've already talked about, the Bon Tibetan swastika, and of course we know what that invokes: thoughts of the Nazi scientist and anthropologist's fascination with Tibet, in India, this part of the world. And here we have, even before them, well, at the same time, we should say, because when you look at the pre-World War II German history, in the 1920s, they were going over in that part of the world too. But here we have, the Soviet secret police guy, wanting to, what's the word I'm looking for? To paint their communism, their Marxist brand, give it some type of legitimacy by saying, see, it relates to this ancient Tibetan philosophy. Yeah, right, Alexander Barchenko and Gleb Boki. I don't think so. Among other things, in a secret laboratory affiliated with the secret police, Boki and Barchenko experimented with Buddhist spiritual techniques to try to find a key for engineering perfect communist human beings. I gotta ask you, what was with the Soviet and Nazi obsession with, coming up with that perfect citizen representative of, their screwed up philosophies, right? The Nazis with their, their perfect Ubermen, perfect Aryan, and then here's the Soviets with the perfect communist ideal. Oh boy. I'll take the American cowboy over either, the perfect communist or Nazi any friggin' day. Where was I? They contemplated a special expedition to Mongolia and Tibet to retrieve the wisdom of Shambhala. However, the project fell through as a result of intrigues within the Soviet intelligence service, as well as rival efforts of the Soviet Foreign Commissariat that sent its own expedition to Tibet in 1924. This I do find interesting from the perspective of what Soviet scientists, were pursuing. What am I referring to? I'm referring to, the long rumored, some say substantiated, you'll have to decide for yourself, pursuit of psychic abilities and sciences that Soviets were going after, were trying to achieve. And of course, you have to think of their different physics. I forget how Joseph Farrell puts it, but that different path in physics that the Soviets were taking. Okay. You have to wonder how much of that might have been influenced by what they learned in Tibet, what these guys learned in Tibet, right? I wonder. The French Buddhist explorer Alexandre David Neil, who you've heard me talk about quite a bit, and I don't think I have her book here. I think it's in my library at home. French Buddhist explorer Alexandra David Neil. She wrote Magic and Mystery in Tibet, which I've talked about in different episodes of this show over the last couple of years, folks. Alexandra David Neil associated Shambhala with Balkh in present-day Afghanistan, also offering the Persian Shami Bala, or elevated candle, as an etymology of its name. Interesting, Shami Bala. Similarly, the Gurdjieffian J.G. Bennett published speculation that Shambhala was Shams-e-Balkh, a Bactrian sun temple. Who are the Bactrians? The Bactrians were those, do I want to say proto-Afghanis? They were the Afghani culture whom Alexander the Great encountered. Now, if you've seen the movie Alexander with Colin Farrell, right? And he marries the princess, the Bactrian princess, played by Rosario Dawson. If you've seen that, those are the Bactrians, the culture that Rosario Dawson comes from. Those are the Bactrians. And I believe in The Man Who Would Be King, when Sean Connery takes a wife from the local culture there, I believe they're supposed to be Bactrians as well, or they're the descendants of the Bactrians. And by the way, that the actress who portrays that princess who marries, or is supposed to marry Sean Connery in that, was in real life Michael Caine's wife. Shakira is her name. But those were the Bactrians, the, pre-Afghanistan Afghanis, if I got that right. I apologize if I'm not getting that right. The Nazis sent several expeditions to Tibet in the 1930s to contact the Agartha and Shambhala. I don't know why the is in there. To contact Agartha and Shambhala. There we have it. You guys were, a lot of you are aware of that. The Nazis were they were into Hollow Earth stories and lore, and also into Shambhala. So, there you go. There is an interesting book, Himmler's. Boy, it's on my shelf. I see it. I just can't think of the title. I'll get that for you guys in a future episode. But it's Himmler's something or others, the title. But it's about one of the Nazi expeditions to Tibet that this refers to. And it's history. It's not a speculative kind of book. To contact Agartha and Shambhala as part of Nazi esotericism. It has been speculated that the SS created a secret base in Tibet during this time and promised to arm the Tibetans against Britain and China. Shambhala was probably the inspiration for Shangri-La, a paradise on earth hidden in a Tibetan valley, which features in the 1933 novel Lost Horizon by British author James Hilton, which is what we're discussing here. Some scholars think that the origin of the Bon and Tonpa Shenrab is Tajikistan, and that Tajik of Tajik Omolong Ring is Tajikistan. Many Tibetologists, say that 3 times, Tibetologists. That would be fun, just to become one of those, just to say, what do you do for a living? I'm a Tibetologist. What is that? Well, I study and contribute to Tibetology. I like that. Many Tibetologists and now wait a minute. I just read that. Many Tibetologists and theorists suggest that the ancient city near Mount Kailash, Kyunglung, may be what the ZHANGZHUNG people called Tajik Omolong Ring. However, some ancient Bonpo scriptures refer to today's Tajikistan as the ZHANGZHUNG word Tajik refers to today's Tajik, and Istan is the Persian word or suffix, I would say, the Persian suffix applied after Islamic rule. At the time of the 7th century AD Tibetan king Songtsen Gampo, the Tajik area was under Tibetan rule. Okay, maybe there's something to this Tajikistan connection. The ZhangZhung emperor was beheaded when he went to war with Amdo in central Tibet, Qinghai. It is thought by some Bon scholars that Tonpa Shenrab was born in the Tajik area. Also, it has been suggested that Kyunglung was never a city as such, but more of a convention center, so to speak, for Bonpo magicians. I kind of like that description. A convention center for Bonpo magicians. Imagine like a big Comic-Con with all these Bonpo magicians there doing their things, selling their wares. They would have, their tables and their merchandise, right? Their demonstrations. Oh, never cities such but more of a convention center for Bonpo magicians, and that the caves were used for ceremonial purposes during times when the clans gathered. So you got caves in there. Recently, the first proto-historical agricultural society in Central Asia was discovered near the ancient town of Sarazm in Kyrgyzstan, a tiny country just north of Tajikistan. Sarazm was the first city in Central Asia to maintain economic relations with a network of settlements covering a vast territory from the Turkmenistan steppes and the Aral Sea in the northwest to the Iranian Plateau and the Indus in the south and southeast. Turkmenistan, a little interesting tidbit. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the fall of the wall and all that, the coup, I was a Russian linguist, and I worked on wiretaps under FISA warrant on then known or suspected Soviet agents. And after the fall, they kind of had to apply our skills with a different mission. And anyway, I ended up being the person who listened to the wiretaps on the Turkmenistan embassy. I was the only person. This is in New York. I was the only FBI language specialist monitoring the Turkmenistan embassy. And this is kind of funny. There were only, in the early days after the fall of the wall, at this embassy, there were literally only two people working there: the ambassador himself and his secretary. I kid you not. I'm listening to the wiretaps because I can tell you it's God's honest truth. There would be a call come in. The ambassador would answer, and he would answer, disguising his voice. Turkmenistan embassy. And they would ask for the ambassador, and he would say, "I'm sorry, he's not available right now." And of course, it's in English because they're asking for him in English. And I mean, it's ridiculous. It was like the scene in Ferris Bueller's Day Off when Ferris Bueller is pretending to be Blaine's father. This is Blaine's father. But the ambassador himself is doing fake voices to get out of accepting a phone call. The Turkmenistan ambassador. So that's my little story about Turkmenistan. The archaeological site of the ancient city of Sarazm is located near Sohibnazar, a village situated on the left bank of the river Zarafshan, near the border with Uzbekistan. Located 15 kilometers west of the city of Panjshir, the site occupies an area of about 1.5 kilometers in length and 400 to 900 meters in width. At the peak of the occupation, the site would have covered an area of up to 90 hectares. Now, Uzbekistan. You guys have been following me for a while. You know I have some history with Uzbekistan. Whenever I would go work in Afghanistan, I would transit through Uzbekistan, specifically the city of Tashkent, which was on the Silk Road. I stayed, when we transit through, I would stay 2, sometimes 3 nights in Tashkent, going and coming. I think I was in Afghanistan 4 times. So I spent stayovers in Tashkent, Uzbekistan 8 times. And it was cool. It was a cool experience. Some of the things I have in my collections at home, little doodads, little objects, and specifically a first edition Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. I kid you not. First English edition. An old babushka was selling it, on her rug of trinkets and stuff. She had this. I'll pull it out and show you guys sometime. She had this first English edition of Around the World in 80 Days, and in the book it talks about Mr. Verne's previous novel, which I think was 20,000 Leagues. I think in 1870s is when this was published. I scooped that right up. But I enjoyed my times in Tashkent. Um, it's always much nicer going home than it was going in, right? Because you leave, the West and you go to Uzbekistan. And now remember, this was in the early 2000s, okay? And, you go into a former behind the Iron Curtain country and you're like, ugh. Then you spend 30 days in friggin' Afghanistan. So when you're going home and you're in Tashkent after 30 days in Afghanistan, Tashkent's suddenly pretty nice. In fact, the only time I've ever been to the ballet was it was my birthday on my way home from Afghanistan. So I treated myself to the ballet. And of course, that it was the 1001 Arabian Nights, which Burton, one of my heroes, had done a famous translation of course. But yeah, I went to the opera house there and saw a ballet. I think there was only 3 of us in the audience, and they had a live orchestra. This wasn't recorded, piped in. It was a live orchestra, and let me tell you, perfection. You would have thought it was a recording. And I had, like a seat in the middle, 4 rows from the stage. It was fantastic. Lots of culture in that line of work. Terrible beer. Good God. Oh, just the worst beer. Where was I? Following surface discoveries unearthed due to agricultural activity, the first excavation of the site started in 1977. We're talking, folks, about Sarazm, okay, which is on the border with Uzbekistan. Excavation of the site started in 1977 and was conducted by Abdullah Isakov of the Academy of Science of Tajikistan. During that first excavation, 8 soundings in the different locations were conducted and 3 areas were excavated. In 1987, 7 areas were excavated and 20 soundings have been conducted. The territory that now constitutes Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan was previously home to several ancient cultures. This is interesting, always here at the Walter Bosley channel, including the city of Sarazm of the Neolithic and the Bronze Age, and was later home to kingdoms ruled by people of different faiths and cultures, including the Oxus civilization, the Andronovo culture, Buddhism, Nestorian Christianity, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, Manichaeism, and Islam. The area has been ruled by numerous empires and dynasties, including the Achaemenid Empire, Sasanian Empire, Hepthalite Empire, Samanid Empire, and the Mongol Empire. Wikipedia tells us that the earliest recorded history of the region dates back to about 500 BC, when much, if not all, of modern Tajikistan was part of the Achaemenid Empire. Some authors have also suggested that in the 7th and 6th centuries BC, parts of modern Tajikistan, including territories in the Zarafshan Valley, formed part of the ancient Hindu Kambojas tribe before it became part of the Achaemenid Empire. After the region's conquest by Alexander the Great, there we go, see? It became part of the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. What did I tell you? Remember, he married the Bactrian princess. A successor state of Alexander's empire. The Silk Road passed through the region, and following the expedition of Chinese explorer Zhang Qian during the reign of Wu Di, 141 BC to 87 BC, commercial relations between the Han Empire and Sogdiana flourished. Sogdians played a major role in facilitating trade and also worked in other capacities as farmers, carpet weavers, glassmakers, and wood carvers. The Kushan Empire, a collection of Yuezhi tribes, took control of the region in the 1st century AD and ruled until the 4th century AD, during which time Buddhism, Nestorian Christianity, Zoroastrianism, and Manichaeism were all practiced in the region. Later, the Hepthalite Empire, a collection of nomadic tribes, moved into the region, and Arabs brought Islam in the early 8th century. Central Asia continued in its role as a commercial crossroads, linking China, the steppes to the north, and the Islamic heartland. It was briefly under the control of the Tibetan Empire and the Tang dynasty from 650 to 680 CE, and then that's Common Era, and then under the control of the Umayyads in 710 Common Era CE. The Samanid Empire, 819 to 999, restored Persian control of the region and enlarged the cities of Samarkand and Bukhara, both cities which are today part of Uzbekistan, which became the cultural centers of Iran, and the region was known as Khorasan. The empire was centered in Khorasan and Transoxiana. At its greatest extent, it encompassed modern-day Afghanistan, large parts of Iran, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, parts of Kazakhstan, and Pakistan, another place I've been to. Specifically, I worked in Islamabad and Karachi, briefly. Karachi. Islamabad was nicer. What is important here is that Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan were originally Tibetan countries that practiced Buddhism and were often controlled by Tibet. It would seem that ZHANGZHUNG originally stretched from Mount Kailash all the way to Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. Did the Bon religion really start in Tajikistan 18,000 years ago? Prior to 500 BC, was Tajikistan ruled by ZHANGZHUNG? That is what the Bon scholars apparently believe. So, that's the article by David Hatcher Childress, The Ancient Tibet and the Tibetan Land of ZHANGZHUNG, from this edition of World Explorer magazine. And as you can see, it bears some weight in the discussion on Shangri-La, the inspiration for, the origin for Shangri-La in Lost Horizon. Now, I would venture to say that, Nicholas Roerich certainly believed in Shambhala and a Shangri-La type of place. Roerich is a really interesting individual. If you've never heard of him, you've never read anything about him, you might want to look into him. Trying to find... Yeah, this is a very interesting chapter in Altai Himalaya when Roerich goes to Tibet, and it is towards the end of the book. Now, remember the reference to the Bonpo swastika. He has some interesting things to say. This is reading from Roerich, okay? The monasteries of Bonpo of the Black Faith, hostile to Buddha, have a curious interest. In the Black Faith, which as a black mass exactly inverts the ritual of the Buddhist faith, one sees only denial of Buddha and denunciation of Buddha and of all Buddhists as enemies. Did the do various satanic churches in the West, did they take their lead from the Bonpa, this Black Faith? Because this sounds very much like, what they do, the renouncing of Christ and so forth. And, you got to wonder, was this their inspiration? If the Buddhists encircle the altars from left to right, the Bonpo takes the opposite direction, right? If the swastika of the Buddhist turns in the direction of the sun, that of the Bonpo must be turned in the opposite direction. Wow. Doesn't it sound like Nazi Germany was, in its philosophy, influenced by, the Bonpo of this Black Faith here? The Bonpo have invented their own saints and special sacred books. They have invented a special protector who replaces Buddha. And if you study the biography of this legendary protector, you will be astonished to find the same details and events as in the life of Buddha. He is also supposed to be of royal family. The Bonpo do not allow Buddhists to enter their temples and acknowledge neither the Tashi Lama nor the Dalai Lama. For them, the Dalai Lama is only a civil ruler collecting taxes. They are very friendly, these Bonpo Black Faith Buddhists. They are very friendly with foreigners because they believe that foreigners have nothing to do with Buddhism. So it's really all about, rejection of Buddhism. It is not a secret sect, and Tibetans told us that now Bon Po is again increasing. This was in the 1920s. So the 1920s, Bon Po was increasing. We can only assume that the Black Faith uh, um, devotees of the Bon Po was increasing well. And this was going into the era when the German anthropologists, who, eventually led Nazi expeditions into this region. So how much of this Bon Po Black Faith Buddhism found its way into Nazi philosophy of the time? Not only have these people invented Buddha, but they have mysterious deities of swastika. Folks, we gotta wonder how the Nazis were influenced by this. This recalls the prehistoric times, the primitive religion of fire worship of the Druids, which has here been corrupted in the incomprehensibly strange deities of swastika. Instead of the sacred word Om, they use the word Ah, just an A. In the old occult teaching, the same expression, Ah, is used for materia matrix, like prima materia. Isn't that interesting? It would be interesting to study the origins of Bon Po, as perhaps something of the Druid and the old fire worship would be found. This is this stuff that Rerich writes. Why am I talking about this, focusing on this? Because now we have to ask the question, if there is a Shangri-La, is there a negative Shangri-La? Well, you might say that T. Ilian in Darkness Over Tibet talks about that negative Shangri-La. He talks about the underground city. And I want to get back to Rerich here because there's something he writes that I want to share with you. T. Ilian in Darkness Over Tibet, let me find it here. The underground city of the initiates, in chapter 4 of Darkness Over Tibet. He goes into this underground city, and it's a bad place. There's cannibalism going on there. It's just not good. And he has to essentially escape. So here's the thing. Ilian wrote this book in 1938, which is after Rerich's book, which was 1929. So 9 years after Rerich's book, in which he really sets up a question: is there an opposite to Shambhala, or what somebody might call Shangri-La after Hilton's novel? And Ilian indicates that yes, there is an opposite to that. Now, here's an interesting part that Rerich writes in the Tibet chapter, and he says, I recall the stones of the Chud, or tombs on Altai. They're past the Goths who penetrated all Europe with their influence, and here in the Trans-Himalayas, we meet the very same ancient tombs. We find places of ancient shrines which carry one's thoughts to the sun cults of the Druids. Wow, there's a way before the Nazis influence of this Himalayan region on Europeans, right? The swords of the northern inhabitants of the Trans-Himalayas might have been taken out of the Goth graves, of the South Russian steppes. Isn't that interesting? The fibulae of Gothic burials, do they not remind you of the buckles of Tibetan tribes? And why was the site of Lhasa some time ago called Gotha according to missionary chronicles? And whence the name of the tribe Gotl? Whence, where, and how did the forefathers of the Goths migrate, driven out by glaciers and by severe moraines? In the crystallized daily life of the northern Tibetans, are there not found the ancient traits of their departed brothers? It is astonishing. One Horpa resembles Molière. Another would fit the type of D'Artagnan. The third resembles an Italian corsair. The fourth, with long strands of hair, is a distortion of a portrait of Hals or Palamedes. This is just some really interesting stuff here in Rorek, and any interest in James Hilton's Lost Horizon should lead you to Rorek. I'm telling you. Now let's continue to see what Rorek has to say about the search for Shambhala. Here's what's interesting. Before ZHANGZHUNG are two unexpected mountain passes. One is shown on the maps, but the other, a larger one of more than 20,000 feet, is not indicated. This road is shown on the maps only by a faint outline. So why? Where does that road lead? Why is it faint? What were they hiding, right? Evidently, no one ever traversed it. There is the other customary southern road, but the Tibetan government sends us through this unexplored northern path. What's interesting is they were fooled with on this expedition, seriously. And they were forced to go in a particular direction that seemed pretty austere. And here he's talking about it. Here's something that was purposely subdued. No one ever travels it, but they're forced to take it. On the way, the elders refuse to give us animals, and again, instead of the passport of the governors, they ask us to send a letter with our seal everywhere. Apparently, our wax seal makes a greater impression. From the crest of the pass, a powerful white chain of snowy giants has appeared. This is the mountain peaks. This is already Nepal and the long-awaited Himalayas on the other side of the Brahmaputra. ZHANGZHUNG is also a small, impoverished village. They eat the corpses of animals and they mix tiny pebbles with the barley. The mendangs are defiled by fallen dogs and all sorts of refuse. So this is already not a great place, right? And maybe it's because of the environmental conditions, where they're at. Let's see. Let's get to... Further in, near the Brahmaputra are 5 monasteries leaning against the rocks of Chatugampa. 2 of them are of the Red sect, and 3 of the Bonpo of the Black Faith. The monasteries of the Black Faith look far newer and cleaner than those of the Red sect. I wonder if the bad guys, because of their ways, they of course get more money and resources. He goes on and talks about, the conditions and, the culture and stuff like that. But he comes to this description. Although Tingrizhong is regarded as a strong fortress, it has a pitiful toy-like aspect, which perhaps had importance previous to the invention of gunpowder. There is no monastery, but only suburgans of the Red sects, with fearful images and stripes as signs of their allegiance to the Red sect. We recall the same fearful images on tantric tankas. What can one not see upon them? Magic swords, flayed human skins, fearful images with projecting teeth and inverted triangles, the entire synthesis of black magic. He mentions the Sven Hedin expedition, which has its connections to pre-World War II Nazi Germany, Thule Society era, that kind of thing. So what's interesting is Rorek really provides some background that that clearly leads to T. Ilian's Darkness over Tibet and this opposite version of Shangri-La, which I think is something we're going to have to explore further, and in our discussion on the Shangri-La and its inspirations, its sources. influenced James Hilton. It would have been interesting if Hilton had written a companion novel to Lost Horizon, maybe a darker story featuring this anti-Shangri-La, you could say. But I think, the Childress article is very interesting. I think the discussion of ZHANGZHUNG reveals, some more excellent background on our search for Shangri-La. And, sometimes you just got to jump into the more academic aspects to get those details because they lead to the real, fun, revealing stuff. So that's what I wanted to share with you this time. And I will go to the live chat and take some questions. Remember, folks, please. Oh, thank you, April Chrisman. Very generous. Thank you very much. Wait a minute. Where's that? And we got our usual gang plus some new folks in here. And remember, folks, please, all caps if you want me to acknowledge the comment or answer your question, because a lot of side conversations go on in live chats, and I want to know that you're addressing me. And if you want me to, answer questions or comment on something, I'm happy to do that. But please put it in all caps. Redcap Goblin asks, how are you? I'm fine, Redcap Goblin. How are you? Johnny Side, again, as he says. And yes, thank you, Johnny Side. Stay on topic, please. That helps. Fractal Education. Cheers, Walter. That was an amazing talk. Thank you. Thank you. I like to present information, as you know, and I find this all very interesting. And thank you, Rogue. Thank you, Rogue. Redcap Goblin's breathing, and that's enough. Hey, I hear you. Sometimes that's definitely the way it is. Now, remember, folks, I'm going to be in the next issue of World Explorer magazine. That's what I'm told, with an article on the esoteric Napoleon. I've been in the magazine a couple times before. I'm personally fascinated with Lost Horizon. The character Conway. This is a guy who's been around the world, and he's just weary of the world and the way it is and the way people are. And he finds, a sanctuary in Shangri-La. And even though he returns to this drudgerous world, he wishes desperately to get back to Shangri-La. And when you think about it, folks, Lost Horizon, much like Atlas Shrugged, the Ayn Rand novel, these are breakaway civilization stories. Okay? The people of Shangri-La, it's a breakaway civilization, essentially. And Conway runs off to accept the offer to be part of the breakaway civilization because they recruit. Now, in Atlas Shrugged, the recruitment is a little more overt. I believe they offer the cigarette. It did not escape me the mysterious lady on my 50th birthday when I'm sitting at a bar with a friend who walks in and sets a cigarette down in front of me and then walks off. That's a topic I'll have to share with you guys sometime. Lost Horizon, Atlas Shrugged, and other stories like it. These are essentially breakaway civilization stories. So Paul Martin asks, what written records exist, if any, I wonder, from the founding of the religion? Wow. You're just going to have to dive in, I think, because there are some sources, but what you're going to have to do, perhaps, is go east to get those sources, because, Western academia is very self-absorbed and insists that it is the pinnacle of everything. And I'm not saying that it's less than what it is. I'm not bashing Western civilization. My gosh, I'm a product of it and a citizen, denizen of it. But I'm not all churchy about it either, so to speak. Churchy with a little c, meaning, oh, I bow down to it, and I don't do. I don't. To me, academia, professors and stuff, they're like the priesthood. Trust me, bro, we're right. Listen to us. No, I'm done with the listening to the trust me, bro people. I think it was done with them a long time ago. But I would recommend look to Eastern academic sources for what you're looking for, Paul. Nick N. Can you repeat all that? I only caught the last 5 minutes. Okay, let me start at the top with the. Is there a better edition of Lost Horizon, or are they all the same? What do you mean a better edition? This is probably one of the most popular ones you'll find out there, but I'm pretty sure you can probably find it in hardcover. It's, out there on the market. Rogue Status. Oh, Nick. Let's go back to Nick for a second. Before I leave here, I'm going to tell you guys who my guest next week is going to be, and I think, Nick, you'll appreciate it, him in particular. It's going to be a lot of fun. Rogue Status is asking, World Explorer magazine can be found at Barnes & Noble. That's the main store that I've found it in, Barnes & Noble. Or you can go online, look up Adventures Unlimited Press, and you can subscribe. D. Dorothy Papineau says, you have quoted some interesting sources. My source is from the High Lamas of the Kagyud sect. Oh, that's interesting. We'll have to talk about that in particular. Maybe if you can help me with my terrible pronunciations. Nick N asks, was wondering if there are various slightly differing revisions of Lost Horizon. You mean the novel or the film? Because the film, the Frank Capra film, for a while there was a section that was lost, no pun intended, that they recreate in still photos, production photos that survive. So if you're talking about the film, I haven't recently looked for a reissue because, Metropolis was incomplete until 2010. And when that footage that was long lost was found in South America and they refurbished it. So I don't know if the same has been done for Lost Horizon, if you're talking about the film. Redcap Goblin says, stay well, all, be good to yourselves. Thank you, Redcap. You too. Oh, Nick is talking about the novel. I'm only aware of, the one version of the novel, but this is the popular paperback that was out several years ago that I, as a bibliophile, I just really like this edition. But there are other editions. D. Dorothy says they are the black hat of the Karmapa. Oh, okay. We're definitely going to have to talk about that. You Red Cap, we'll see you next time. Yeah, I really recommend the Alexandra David Neal Magic and Mystery in Tibet. That is a must-have if you're interested, anyone in this stuff. So let me see. I'm going to make sure that I'm remembering everything that I wanted to share. Okay, I'll go ahead and tell you while we're waiting for the next question. Next week, my guest is going to be Max Conkey. Now, Max is the host of Max's Models here at YouTube, and he's a model kit builder. I follow him, regularly. I check anytime he posts a video, I watch it. I'm always checking him daily. And but Max is an interesting guy beyond just the model kit building. He is a military veteran like myself. I believe he was airborne. And he was law enforcement in connection with the military and I think civilian too. Of course, I'm former law enforcement. He's also a commercial pilot. He is an Airbus pilot. I forget which particular model. Just recently got his Airbus certification, so he's out there flying Airbuses. And he's just I think maybe a year or two older than me or something, but we're both of that Super 8 filmmaking generation. Really interesting guy with a really interesting background in life. And so I'm anxious to have him on. And yes, we're going to talk a little bit about model kit building, but other things as well. Nick N asks, do you have a copy of the Alexander David Neal book that you can show for reference? I can do that next time, or I can post a photo of it in the community tab when I get home. It's in my library at home. Our studio is here at Malia's place. So I will have to share that with you guys. Mine is an edition from the 50s. Dion, the Rorich, it's Roerich. It's a different spelling. So if you want to look him up. There was some controversy because he was associated with Vice President Wallace, who was FDR's vice president. And there was an issue of a letter he wrote to Rorich in which he started out, Dear Guru, which, was just, they were friends and stuff, and people made a lot of hay out of that. Wait a minute. D. Dorothy asks, what other things next week? That's all I know for sure. Next week is Max Conkey is going to be my guest here on the Wednesday show. Now, Malia and I, we'll know what we're going to do next Friday as we get into that week. So, yes, Nick, I know it's lowercase, but Rorich's art is incredible stuff. You guys have to check it out. It's very unique, interesting stuff. Damn it. Rogue Status asks if Malia and I will be on Friday. Yes, we will. Of course. Oh my gosh, I forgot about my... Oh, and folks, Martin Popoff will be back in February. So I'm looking forward to that. Martin Popoff is anxious to come back on. He's got a new book coming out, and I'll tell you about what that is after I get a look at it. I will allow one off-topic question, and that's from Nick, because it's about model kit building. Nick says, what was the Enterprise spaceship you showed? That was from my kid Liliana and her boyfriend Ken. And what that was is the Enterprise of the Discovery show, the one right before the famous original series Enterprise. But you know what? I'm not going to paint it in the color scheme of Discovery. I'm going to paint it like Starfleet of the original series because I prefer that. So that's the model kit that was. D. Dorothy Papineau says, the tattooed shaman of the Altai is interesting. Oh, you'll have to tell me more about that. We're going to have to compare some notes, you and me and Malia, because you're bringing up some real interesting stuff, D. Dorothy. Tessa 1111 says she was blown away by the Joseph Farrell Secherie Nano Girl podcast. So I did yesterday. I recorded, which I think is posted now, with Chris Matthew of Forbidden Knowledge episode, talking about the state of ufology and stuff. So look for that one.
We're talking secret missions this Friday.
This Friday, we will be talking about the Secret Missions series, my Secret Missions book series. Anything in specific or particular you want to tease them with, or
not right now?
Okay,
we're gonna get into Juan Cabrillo a little bit.
Juan Cabrillo, yes, the first book. Rogue status. Well, thank you for being here, Rogue. I appreciate it. We'll see you next time for sure. I hope. D. Dorothy, when will Sesh be coming back? I've got to talk to him about when he can come back, because he's okay after getting hit by a car, which I think I told you guys about. I think he's recovering okay, and
he likes some prep time.
Yeah, he likes prep time and stuff. So I would say the soonest we could have him on would be next month. Remember, we have Joseph Farrell on the 24th. Joseph Farrell will be back for another transtemporal cosmic whatever discussion. On January 24th. So look for that. Max Conkey next week, Joseph Farrell the week after, and I'm Martin Popoff next month, scheduled already. So okay, any more questions about anything, any topic at all? I'll open it up to any topic. And while I'm waiting for that, remember, if you haven't read it, get this book, read it. It's a good book. It really is. And check out the movie, but check out the original from 1937, the Frank Capra film. Yes, Nick, and I agree with you. The Secret Missions series would make a great TV show. Absolutely. That's being discussed, by the way. And I'll leave it at that. Remember, folks, just because TV possibilities are discussed doesn't mean money gets exchanged. Some people, not everybody, have an idea that just because you got something in development or just because you got people interested, it doesn't mean they're giving you wheelbarrows of money just to express their interest. Okay, you're working towards the wheelbarrows of money that come after it gets produced. By the way, I learned from a post by Don Ecker today that the writer on several science fiction TV shows over the last, 35, 40 years, Tracy Torme passed away today. He wrote Fire in the Sky, the movie about the very controversial and questionable Travis Walton case. But, fun movie. A high school buddy of mine worked on Fire in the Sky, by the way. I think he was an assistant director. But Tracy Torme passed away today, 64 years old. Ari Babel. It's going to be 3 degrees here on Friday. Yikes. I'll be huddled in front of the show wrapped in a blanket.
What's happening Friday? It's going to Arctic.
Well, didn't you say it's going to be 31 below?
31
below in Montana. Of course, they're in northwest Montana. They're up there by the glacier, but still, it's crazy. Nick Ann asks, any progress on the movie mini sets? Well, yes, the table that the sets will be constructed on is in itself coming together. It's being constructed, and I'll post some pictures of that soon. But once I get the table done, then I can start building the miniatures. And Nick, I'm telling you, every time I look into the box, and stuff, the stuff you sent, the tools you sent are just amazing. Thank you 1,000 times, because it really, it's just amazing. And some of that other, the stuff with the landscape, and that's going to go right into the movie set things. So I'll start posting pictures. Tessa 1111. Yes, Tessa. Tracy Torme was Mel Torme was his father, the singer Mel Torme. Oh, here we go. Johnny Side, Lost Horizons is on Audible. So if you don't have time to read the book or you prefer audiobooks, go to Audible. Lost Horizon. Lost Horizon by James Hilton. So what time are we looking at? Okay, we still got a few more minutes, folks, for, I like to go 90 minutes. And yeah, I was thinking about saying something, but no, I'm going to hold off. Having to do with media projects and stuff, but we are pursuing more strongly in the coming year media development of my books and properties and such, and doing some of our own documentary projects, right, Malia?
Yes.
Tessa1111 says Mel Torme wrote Chestnuts Roasting. I didn't know that. Nick N asks, any updates on the Lost Future with Todd Wood third book? No updates, but he and I we've assured each other, and we're assuring you that it is going to happen. It is going to happen, but how these things kind of happen is you find that you have to do other things that bring to you the data that you need to do the book that you've kind of got on hold of the back burner. In other words, you can't do, like, we realized we couldn't do the third book yet. We just needed to know more. We needed to gather more data. So that's why the third book, Lost Future book, is on hold. But it is going to happen.
Do you want to talk about the novel you're working on now?
Oh, the spy novel?
Yeah.
Based upon my career experiences?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's definitely moving forward. That's all I'm going to say about it right now. I'm sitting here in the studio while the fragrance of fresh chili is wafting in from the kitchen right over there, and
it's making it very distracting.
That's right. Malia has been seducing me with the chili. So I'm looking forward to. Is it done?
Oh yeah.
Oh, happy joy. Well, folks, I think that's it. Chili time. Remember, go find James Hilton's Lost Horizon on Audible if you want to do the audiobook. Look for Darkness Over Tibet by T. Ilian if you're interested in these topics. Altai Himalaya by Nicholas Roerich.
Great book.
Yes. And, of course, World Explorer magazine, from which I just read the David Childress article, and which an article of mine will be appearing in next issue. So thank you all for being here. Again, thank you for the generous super chat there, April Chrisman. Thank you very, very much. And Nick N says the spy novel will be thinly disguised as fiction. Parts of it, yeah. You'll have to, let me put it to you this way. You guys will have to decide which is, what's fiction in it and what was real. Okay? But it's been something I've been wanting to do for a long time. So anyway, thank you all for being here, and we'll see you on Friday. All right? So, okay, have a good night.